I rise today to address what I call an issue of public responsibility. More specifically, I rise to address the responsibility of both the legislative and the executive branch to deal with our nation's out-of-control deficit spending. Unfortunately, the President has shown little interest in the dire fiscal situation facing our nation, which makes it all the more important for Congress to do so. Without presidential leadership, it's now Congress' duty to step up and take the lead. We have an obligation, first of all, to be straightforward and honest with the American people about the financial challenges America faces. There was a furor over our continuing plunge into debt and deficit, starting in 2009 and 2010 as we saw the spending explode with stimulus plans that didn't work, other policies that continue to drive us into debt. Unfortunately, that level of intensity and that displeasure over all that was happening has subsided. But the problem hasn't gone away. It needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed now. As I said, we have an obligation as members of this body and of the Congress to be honest and straightforward with the American people about where we stand and what we would do about it. I received a letter from one of my constituents, Stephen of Martinsville, Indiana, wrote to me to describe his concerns about our national debt and spending. Let me quote from his letter. As of today, the outstanding national debt is over $18 trillion. That is an overly exorbitant amount of money, he said. Well, it certainly is, Stephen. You are right. It is an exorbitant amount of money, one that we can't hardly even get our minds around in terms of what $18 trillion means. Therefore, he said, I would like to know our options in America. I think we as elected officials have an obligation to list those options and describe what we would do about it had we had the opportunity and had we had the support from the President, which is not forthcoming, but perhaps it will. Surely, even the executive branch and the President have to understand the situation that we are in and the consequences of not doing something about it. I'm sure my colleagues received many letters and information from constituents concerned about the health of our nation, from our mounting federal debt to our management, or I suppose we could say mismanagement, of the federal budget. Our constituents want to know what we, as their elected officials, are going to do about it. What is plain as day to Stephen, unfortunately, is not so clear here in Washington, because the President says we don't have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. I can't go home to the people in Indiana and tell them that we need to tax more because government is growing more and needs their money, and do so without derision coming back my way because people are being taxed to death. This President has an obsession with solving every conceivable problem with asking for more revenue and more taxes. And yet, no matter, the revenue is increasing, and yet we have not placed the necessary spending restraints to control this ever-growing dilemma of deficit spending. I think there's only one real solution to our problem, a solution that is absolutely necessary because we literally have tried everything else and come up short. And that solution is for this body to pass a balanced budget constitutional amendment. And that's why I'm co-sponsoring an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that forces the federal government to balance its budget, limits its growth of government spending, and requires a supermajority to pass any tax increase. Without these measures, we will not successfully deal with this problem. This is not a new idea. I served here in 1995 and again in 1997. I voted for a balanced budget amendment to limit spending and require the federal government to balance its checkbook. Both times the Senate came one vote short of the necessary 2/3 to pass a constitutional amendment, send it to the states for ratification. one vote, one member out of 100 could have voted with us, and we would put ourselves in a fiscal situation that would have balanced our budget, and we would not begin to have the problems of ever increasing debt, ever increasing new taxes to cover that debt, conscription on terms of spending for national priorities like defense and health research and so forth. Had that happened, unfortunately it didn't. And at that time, we had a nation's debt that stood at $5.36 trillion. It's 3.5%, 3.5 times that amount today. If we had had the political will to act then, we would not be faced with the financial challenges that exist today. So by passing a balanced budget amendment, we could send to the states not just a message that we are serious about addressing our fiscal woes, but that we are giving them a voice. We're giving people a voice. We're giving them the power to hold federal spending accountable. It would be a unique opportunity to right a wrong and begin restoring our fiscal house by making the federal government accountable for its spending. In March of 1997, I stood on this very floor and warned about the dangers of operating outside our means. I said it then, and I'd like to say it again today, and I'm quoting for what I said in 1997. There is no reliable check on this process of intergenerational theft. It is politically prudent, even popular, and this political calculation will not change, will never permanently change without some kind of systematic institutional counterweight, without some measure to give posterity a voice in our affairs. Nothing, in my view, will permanently change until the accumulation of popular debt is a violation to our oath and to the Constitution. Perverse incentives of the current system will not be altered until the system itself is altered, until our political interests are balanced by the weighty words of a constitutional amendment. It would be a much-needed balance. We need to come to this body at the beginning of each session, put our left hand on the Bible and our right hand forward, and swear to uphold the Constitution, which would involve responsible spending to keep us from plunging into disastrous consequences. Now, earlier I mentioned that Stephen from Martinsville, Indiana, sent me this letter. What I did not mention is that Stephen is a Boy Scout working toward earning his Citizenship in the Nation Merit Badge, which teaches Scouts how to become active citizens who are aware of and grateful for their liberties and their rights. And we all know that Boy Scouts take this oath. The oath is to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, brave, clean, and reverent, and thrifty. If we just take one of those principles, thrifty, and apply it to our governing, then America will be in a better place. We cannot fail Stephen, and we cannot fail his generation. His share of the debt will amount to more than $62,000 per person, his share in 10 years. Let us not keep shifting the hard choices to our children and our grandchildren. Let us not deny them the American dream that all of us in my generation have enjoyed. The opportunity that comes with responsible spending and a responsible government. Opportunity that comes to few people in the world. We are so privileged as Americans to have that, and we are denying that to the future. By passing this balanced budget amendment, we can honor the most moral tradition of sacrificing for posterity instead of asking prosperity to sacrifice for us. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.